Do you want mulch or do you want plants? More plants! In this video, I'm gonna answer the question, what are sedges anyway? Why is everybody talking about them and how should I use them in the garden? I'm gonna explain why I think sedges belong in every single garden, especially shade gardens. And more importantly, how they can help us get rid of our addiction to mulch. If you have shade or part shade, sometimes it can feel like your options are limited. Maybe you were hopeful like me and tried to grow something that needs a lot of sun in a place that's kind of part shade, and it didn't really do well where it was planted. Maybe there's a ton of mulch and empty space around your trees because nothing really grows there. That's when we can start talking about sedges. If you walk through a wetland or a forest, you're gonna notice small plants that kind of look like grasses. These plants are probably sedges. Sedges are a very important family of plants that usually grow in places where there's a lot of water, but they're found in dry woodlands as well. They have grassy looking leaves and they grow in little clumps, forming little patches on the ground. Sedges look just like grass, but if you take a closer look, you'll see that sedges have edges. That's kind of a fun way to remember them. Grasses are a little different because when you cut them, they have a hollow stem, they have these joints. But the biggest difference that gardeners need to know is that grasses usually need full sun, which anybody knows if you have a shady area and you've been trying to grow grass there and you're constantly working hard to try to keep it happy in the shade. And it's not. Grasses usually need full sun. Sedges are superheroes. They even have little flowers. They're not as showy as the flowers that we're used to thinking of in the garden. They're kind of small and just hidden amongst the leaves. Sedges are also known as the genus carex, which you might recognize from seeing some plants at the nursery. Carex is a big group that has a lot of species in it, so carex or sedge is just a general term for what we're going to be talking about today. I might use the terms interchangeably. Okay, with that out of the way, carex come in all shapes and sizes. You can usually find a carex for any area of the garden. Some have long, skinny leaves and others have flat, wider leaves. Some are perfect for wet locations and others do just fine in dry locations. One of the issues that gardeners run into a lot is the dreaded dry shade garden. We feel like nothing's gonna grow here. In dry shade, plants just have to be careful about how much energy they put into flowering. As we've talked about before, flowers are very energy intensive for plants. So shade plants without the endless energy that they have from the sun tend to have smaller flowers than full sun plants. That doesn't mean that their flowers aren't beautiful. They're just not as large and showy. For example, you're not gonna get like large hibiscus-like flowers in the shade. But one thing you can do with a shade garden is work with beautiful textures. This is where sedges can really level up your garden. They give you an almost magical looking backdrop to your garden throughout the whole season. Most sedges are actually at least partially evergreen. When you pair fine sedges with plants that have large, broad leaves, it looks really cool. Let's talk about mulch. An important difference in gardening with sedges is that eventually it ends up eliminating your need for mulch. This sedge matrix has become your mulch. Since sedges are so nice looking, so green and fine, they're a fantastic plant for your flowering plants to play off of, even during times of year where there's nothing flowering. The next spring, when you realize you don't have to spend a ton on mulch for your garden, that's gonna be a good day. If you want to give nutrients back to the soil, you can simply leave last year's sedge leaves on the ground, or you can chop and drop them. That'll let the nutrient cycle continue. When you realize if you use enough sedges, it completely eliminates the need for mulch. People kind of overuse this term, but I really think it's a game changer. And native plant gardeners aren't the only ones doing this. Conventional and ornamental gardeners have realized that we were just really overdoing the mulch. I have a colleague that designs beautiful ornamental gardens, and she has gorgeous photos from her dry shade garden. Her designs really minimize the need for mulch over time. So everybody's kind of on board with this. We're all tired of hauling in yards and yards of mulch every single year. When you think about it, do you want mulch? Or do you want plants? If you're enjoying the channel, now's your chance to subscribe so you don't miss all the fun we're gonna have during planting season. If you're already subscribed, consider becoming a member at my Patreon. That helps keep the videos going so I can make more videos about native plants. Sedges also host insects and birds. One of the reasons that I rave so much about sedges is that they're really awesome for the ecosystem. They give shelter and food for insects and birds. Some of them even host butterfly caterpillars. They provide food and a home for so many critters. Caterpillars munch on their leaves. Birds use them as nesting material. Frogs and other animals hide underneath the leaves for shelter during the summer and winter. Sedges also attract pollinators like bees and butterflies. It's kind of like a mini ecosystem all on its own. They also work great together with other plants. They're basically a living mulch, which means they play an important part in covering the ground. Most gardeners already know that it's important to cover the ground, and we're going to talk a little bit about why. When sedges are covering the ground, they're blocking the sunlight from hitting the ground and just baking it and drying it out. This protects the soil life and the fungi from those harsh conditions. But not only do they protect from the sun, they also protect from those freezing temperatures in the winter. Soil temperatures are a lot warmer than air temperatures when we get those Arctic blasts that make it really cold for a few days. Under the ground, there's insects and frogs that are hibernating over the winter. The sedges act like a blanket, insulating the soil from drying out when that dry, cold air comes down from the Arctic every winter. This next one is important in the forest as well as in the garden. Sedges prevent weed seeds from sprouting. Most weed seeds need light to start sprouting, and if a sedge is covering it, the weeds don't stand a chance. We have big problems with invasive species, and if a sedge is covering up the ground, they can prevent these invasives before they start. This is really important if you've recently removed invasive species. That means that sunlight is now hitting the ground for the first time in years, and those weed seeds have been waiting for that light. Sedges can help prevent the invasives from just coming back right away, or other opportunistic invasives starting to take over. Erosion and soil. Sedges are like the architects of the forest soil. Their roots are extremely fibrous and they're so good at holding the soil together. This really helps to prevent erosion. If soil gets washed away by a heavy rain, that is really bad for our ecosystem. The soil ends up gone, it starts polluting our rivers and streams. Sedges are super important for keeping our soil and our rivers healthy. Lawn replacement. Some companies have been doing some research on how to use sedges as a lawn replacement. This is a great idea. So far, there have been mixed results. I think the biggest issue is not that the sedges don't look great, because they do, but they don't stand up that well to foot traffic. And most people want a lawn to function that way in their yard. But if you don't have to play soccer on your grass, and you don't have dogs that are going to trample it, sedges in shady areas could be a good idea to replace the lawn, at least partially. If you're not using your lawn to play soccer, and you don't have dogs who are going to trample it, I think maybe replacing some of your shade lawn with sedges might be a good idea. You can mow them once or twice a season if you want, but a lot of them just don't grow very tall and really don't need very much maintenance. I think it's a really underused idea that we don't talk about enough, which is replacing the lawn under trees with sedges. We already know that the lawn really doesn't like growing under trees. Sedges and our native trees have a relationship that dates back millions of years. If it's under a tree and it's not really a high traffic area, why not give it a try and replace the lawn in like a 10-foot diameter and see how it goes? Let me know if you've replaced some of your lawn with sedges. I'd love to see a picture. Now for the fun part. We're going to talk about the different types of sedges and how to use them in your garden. I'm going to list 5 sedges I use in the Midwest to create a beautiful and healthy garden. Most of these species are going to be native to Eastern North America, but if you live somewhere else, you can definitely find sedges that have these characteristics. Sedges grow all over the world: Europe, Asia, Australia. I think there's a sedge in every location. Okay, so full sun plants usually get all the attention, so we're going to start with the shade sedges right now. Rosy sedge, or Carex rosea. This is a gorgeous plant, beautiful fine texture. It stays in a clump. It likes medium to moist soil. It's really pretty. After it flowers, it looks a little bit flat, like somebody sat on it, but it recovers really quickly. It's still worth it in my opinion. It's just such a fine textured plant. I love Carex rosea. The next one's Pennsylvania sedge, Carex pennsylvanica. This is my standard go-to for shade and part shade. It's a beautiful, tough plant, amazing roots. This is a true woodland plant. It loves oaks. They're best buddies. It spreads gracefully and politely by rhizomes, filling in empty spots, but it still plays nice with your other plants. It's very easy to control. And because it spreads by rhizomes, that means that you can really easily dig up the little runners and plant more. This one likes medium to dry soil. This is not really for the rain garden. Plantain sedge, Carex plantaginea. For some reason, people don't think of these wider leaves as attractive, but this plant is tough as nails and it tolerates deep shade. So if you have an area that is really difficult to plant things, nothing grows there but hostas, try plantain sedge. Okay, now here's a couple of sedges for full sun. Palm sedge, or Carex muskingumensis. This one grows literally anywhere. Sun, part shade, wet, dry. Like, it's a really tough plant. Very successful. It can spread a lot if you don't watch it. It's usually about 12 inches, but I do have one in a rain garden that gets a lot of sun and a lot of water, and it's about 24 inches tall. In the spring, the dead material from the palm sedge will kind of lay down over your other plants, so if you don't want that to take over, get in a little bit early and cut that one back in the spring. Burr sedge, Carex grayi. Okay, literally every single person, every person who comes to my garden asks me what this is. They're asking,
oh my God, what is that? Oh my God, what is that?
Everybody wants to know what it is, and I say it's burr sedge. It's a 10 out of 10 for cool looking. It looks like a medieval weapon of some kind. It's a wetland rain garden plant, and it does tolerate some flooding. It has these nice light green leaves and just the coolest seed heads I've ever seen. That is cool. Ducks and geese will eat the seeds. Again, this is a wetland plant, so it feeds birds that live on the water. It's barely rained at all this month, and these grasses are just huge. Carex grayi, grazed sedge, and this is palm sedge. You can see how my rain garden looks when it's a drought. So rain garden doesn't mean it's a wet spot where you breed mosquitoes. It means when the rain comes, these guys are gonna be ready. Appalachian sedge, or Carex appalachica. That's how you say it? Appalachica. Okay, this one's so cute. It's like a 12-inch round, fine textured, clumping sedge. This one can tolerate a lot drier conditions than some of the other sedges. This one can be out in the sun. I love it because it's small and cute. It looks like a mini prairie dropseed, which is kind of nice because prairie dropseed can be like 2 feet in diameter when it's mature. So it's kind of nice to have something a little bit smaller if you have a smaller space or you just need something of that texture. Carex albicans. I gotta find out what the common name is for these. This one is for almost full sun. It's a clumping sedge that I love so much. Last year they sold out very early in the season. There was just so much demand for this plant because of how beautiful it is and its versatility. It can go in the sun a little bit more than the other sedges. It just got sold out. So I'm waiting for the next season so I can get some for my garden. This one's fine textured. It stays in a clump. It kind of looks like Carex rosea, but it can tolerate a little bit more dry, a little bit more sun than Carex rosea. How do you find sedges? Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. You usually have to get them from local native plant nurseries. A lot of local nurseries are a little bit more progressive now. They realize there's a demand for native plants, so they're starting to carry more of these items. The one by my house actually has plugs, but they also have gallons of sedges, which is really nice to see. You know, if you don't want to wait for them to get big, you can get a gallon. Last year, my local nursery had gallons of Carex appalachica, which I was really surprised to find in a conventional nursery. So these species used to be harder to find, but now we have a lot of native plant nurseries that will ship regionally. Plan on getting one sedge to fill a spot, maybe 12 to 18 inches across. If you see sedges at your local nursery and you don't know if they're native or not, you can do a Google search for scientific name and BONAP, and that search result will usually show you a map of where the plant is native. This isn't a perfect science, so don't get bogged down why they found some in Milwaukee, but they don't have any in Peoria. Probably they just didn't go to Peoria, so they didn't record whether the plant is native there. Plus, it's all corn now, so just think of it as a tool to help you and don't let it confuse you or discourage you. Spring cutback. Here's some footage of me cutting back my sedges in the garden in late March. For those of you who know what it means, I'm in zone 5B. So I just waited a day too long to make this video and it started snowing. I cut them back at this time because I want to remove this dead material before they start to flower and leaf out. You absolutely do not have to do this. I'm just doing it for my own sense of aesthetics, so fight me in the comments. I try not to cut too much of the green material. You can actually see some flower buds there. When we think of flowers, this isn't usually what we imagine, but they are definitely flowering. I will always use sedges in the garden. They make everything look so much better. They're so healthy for the ecosystem and for the soil. And if I never have to spread mulch again, I'll be a happy gardener. If you're looking for plants that would go great with sedges, I'm creating a playlist of plants and you can find them right here.